You've been listening wrong your entire life. Not to music, not to podcasts, to everything that actually matters. The top 1% of performers in any field share a secret that sounds almost too simple to be true. They don't listen for what's being said. They listen for what's deliberately not being said. The ghost notes, the silence between words, the absent data that tells the real story. And here's what's disturbing about your current situation. You've optimized your entire life for being right, for avoiding mistakes, for never looking stupid. But neuroscience has proven something that will make you uncomfortable. No errors means no learning. Your brain literally cannot rewire itself without failure. The synaptic connections that create mastery only form when you get things wrong. So while you've been protecting your ego, the top 1% have been collecting failures like trophies. Today, I'm going to share 5 rules that fundamentally changed how I operate, not productivity hacks, not morning routines. These are mental operating systems that separate those who achieve extraordinary results from everyone else who stays comfortable and stuck. The ghost notes. When jazz musicians play, there's something happening between the notes that most people never hear. Miles Davis called them ghost notes, the barely audible sounds that exist in the negative space of music. The top 1% have learned to apply this principle to every conversation, every meeting, every piece of information they consume. They're not listening for confirmation. They're hunting for what's missing. Think about the last important conversation you had. What did you focus on? Probably the words being spoken. Maybe the tone. But did you notice what wasn't said? What topics were carefully avoided? What questions went unanswered? The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. Here's the practical shift. In your next meeting, write down every topic that logically should have been discussed but wasn't. Every question that hung in the air without acknowledgement. That list of absences contains more intelligence than the entire transcript of what was actually spoken. The wealthy don't just consume information. They interrogate silences. Absent data reveals truth. What are you not hearing in your own life right now? Error optimization. Your entire education was designed around one catastrophic lie: that mistakes are bad, that errors should be minimized, that the goal is to get things right. But neuroscientists at Columbia University discovered something that should terrify anyone who's been playing it safe. The brain's learning mechanisms only activate during prediction errors, when you expect one thing and experience another. Your dopaminergic neurons fire in a specific pattern that physically rewires your neural architecture. No error, no rewiring, no failure, no growth. The equation is that simple. Your comfort zone is a neural prison. The top 1% understood this and flipped the script. They don't optimize for getting things right. They optimize for getting things wrong, fast, and learning from the wreckage. If this is hitting close to home, hit like and subscribe to reprogram more of these blocks. Because what I'm about to share will challenge everything you believe about success. Here's your assignment. This week, deliberately attempt something you're almost certain to fail at, not to succeed, to fail intelligently, to force your brain into that error state where real learning becomes possible. The people who seem to learn faster than you aren't smarter. They're just failing more strategically. But this raises an uncomfortable question about what you're really optimizing for. The identity filter. Most people make decisions by asking a simple question. What will this get me? More money, more status, more comfort. But the top 1% ask a harder question that most people never consider. Become. What will this decision make me? There's a profound difference. The first question is transactional. The second is transformational. When you optimize for outcomes, you'll take shortcuts. You'll compromise. You'll do whatever produces the result fastest. But when you optimize for identity, every decision becomes a vote for the person you're becoming. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Consider 2 people offered the same unethical business opportunity. One asks, what will this get me, and calculates the risk versus reward. The other asks, what will this make me, and immediately recognizes that accepting would make them someone they don't want to be. Same situation, completely different frameworks. The wealthy don't chase opportunities. They filter opportunities through their identity. Before your next major decision, stop asking what you'll gain. Start asking who you'll become. Because the person you're building is the ultimate asset or liability. And speaking of long-term thinking, the next rule reveals why most people quit at exactly the wrong moment. Cathedral time. In the year 1500, Oxford University faced an unusual problem. The massive oak beams supporting their great hall were beginning to rot after 500 years of service. Where would they find oak trees large enough to replace them? A forester was consulted, and his response has haunted me ever since. We already have the replacement trees. The original architects, 5 centuries earlier, had planted a grove of oak trees, knowing that one day those beams would fail. They thought in cathedral time, generations beyond their own lifetimes. Plant today, harvest centuries. The top 1% don't think in quarters or years, they think in decades and legacies. Every decision they make today is a seed planted for a harvest they may never personally reap. But here's the tragic reality of how most people operate. They abandon projects right before the inflection point. The growth curve of almost everything valuable follows a J shape. Flat, 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 then suddenly vertical. Most people quit during the flat part. They don't see progress, so they assume there is none. But the compound effect is working invisibly beneath the surface. The ones who keep going during the flat part get almost all the upside. What are you giving up on right now that's actually 3 months away from breaking through? This leads directly to how the top 1% think about their most limited resource. Asymmetric bets. The mathematics of the top 1% are fundamentally different from everyone else. Average performers seek balanced outcomes. Win some, lose some. Reasonable returns for reasonable risks. But elite performers have learned to structure their entire lives around asymmetric bets. Situations where the downside is limited, but the upside is theoretically unlimited. Consider 2 investment approaches. Option 1 puts $10,000 into a stable fund, returning 8% annually. Safe, predictable. Option 2 divides that same $10,000 into $2,500 bets on high-risk, high-reward ventures. If 19 fail completely and 1 succeeds massively, that single winner might return 50 times the investment. The math favors asymmetry. The greatest fortunes came from bets with capped downside and uncapped upside. This applies beyond money. Learning a new skill has asymmetric properties. The worst case is you waste some time. The best case is it transforms your career trajectory. Reaching out to someone you admire costs nothing but a few minutes. The worst case is silence. The best case could change your life. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Start auditing your decisions for asymmetry. How many unlimited upside opportunities are you avoiding because of limited downside risks? But asymmetric thinking requires one more component that ties everything together. First principles. Elon Musk talks about first principles thinking so often it's become a cliché. But most people fundamentally misunderstand what it actually means. First principles thinking isn't about being smarter. It's about being willing to look stupid long enough to understand something from the ground up. Question everything, rebuild truth. When Musk wanted to build rockets, industry experts told him it was impossible to reduce launch costs. Everyone knew the prices were fixed. Everyone accepted the limitations. But instead of accepting inherited assumptions, he asked a different question. What are rockets actually made of? Aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. What do those raw materials cost? About 2% of the rocket's typical price. The other 98% was convention, middlemen, and historical accident. Question. Every industry, every field, every aspect of your life is built on assumptions that someone made decades ago. Most of those assumptions were never questioned. They just became the way things are done. The top 1% regularly ask questions that seem stupid on the surface. Why do we do it this way? What if we started from scratch? Which of these rules are actual laws and which are just habits? The person willing to look foolish asking basic questions often finds the breakthrough everyone else missed. But first principles thinking requires an environment that most people never create. Feedback loops. Here's a pattern that separates amateurs from professionals in any domain. Amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. The difference is feedback loops. Tight, immediate, brutally honest feedback loops. Without feedback, there is no learning, only repetition. The top 1% engineer their environment to receive constant feedback on their performance. They don't wait for annual reviews. They don't rely on polite encouragement. They build systems that tell them the truth whether they want to hear it or not. Consider the difference between practicing guitar alone in your room versus recording every session and listening back. Same time investment, radically different results. The recording creates a feedback loop that your brain can't ignore. What gets measured gets managed, and what gets honest feedback gets mastered. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most people actively avoid feedback. They don't record themselves. They don't ask for honest reviews. They protect their ego from information that could accelerate their growth. What feedback are you currently avoiding? What truth about your performance would hurt to hear but help to know? The answer to that question is probably the key to your next level. And this connects directly to who you surround yourself with. Proximity power. You've heard that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but this dramatically understates the case. Research from Harvard's Nicholas Christakis found that behaviors spread up to 3 degrees of separation. Your friend's friend's friend affects your outcomes. You're being programmed by people you've never met. The top 1% understand that proximity isn't just about motivation or accountability. It's about unconscious pattern absorption. When you spend time around people operating at a higher level, your brain automatically calibrates to their standards. What seemed impossible becomes normal. What seemed ambitious becomes baseline. Standards are contagious, choose wisely. But here's what most people get wrong about proximity. They try to network upward without providing value. They want access to successful people without asking what they can contribute. The wealthy don't network. They create genuine relationships based on mutual value exchange. Your network is your net worth. Instead of asking who can help me, start asking who can I help at the level I want to reach. The path to proximity runs through contribution, not consumption. What would you need to create or become to be genuinely valuable to someone operating at the level you aspire to? That's your real roadmap. But all of this requires one final element that most people lack entirely. Execution debt. Every idea you have but don't act on creates what I call execution debt. It accumulates interest. It weighs on your subconscious. And eventually it bankrupts your confidence entirely. Execute. The top 1% have an almost pathological bias toward action. Not reckless action, not busy work, but rapid movement from concept to test. They understand something most people don't. Information without implementation is just entertainment. You can read every book on fitness without gaining an ounce of muscle. You can study every investing strategy without growing your portfolio by $1. Knowledge only becomes power when it's applied. Here's the paradox. Most people wait until they feel ready to act, but readiness is a feeling that follows action, not precedes it. You don't feel ready, then act. You act, then feel ready. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time. The wealthy have a 24-hour rule. Any idea that survives 24 hours of consideration gets tested within the following 24 hours. Not perfected, tested. Speed of implementation separates dreamers from achievers. What idea have you been sitting on that's accumulating execution debt right now? The final rule ties everything we've discussed into a single operating system. Compounding identity. Everything we've discussed today shares one common thread. The top 1% understand that results compound, but identity compounds faster. Listen for ghost notes and you become someone who sees what others miss. Optimize for errors and you become someone who learns faster than the competition. Think in cathedral time and you become someone who builds legacies instead of chasing quick wins. Make asymmetric bets, and you become someone who captures unlimited upside. Question first principles, and you become someone who finds breakthrough opportunities. Engineer feedback loops, and you become someone who improves relentlessly. Cultivate proximity, and you become someone who operates at higher standards. Execute rapidly, and you become someone whose ideas manifest in reality. Each rule individually is powerful, but together they create a compounding identity. Most people try to change their results directly. They focus on tactics, hacks, and shortcuts. But results are downstream of behavior, and behavior is downstream of identity. Identity drives behavior, behavior drives results. When you install these 5 rules as operating principles, you're not just changing what you do. You're changing who you are, and who you are determines everything you'll ever achieve. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The question isn't whether these rules work. The question is whether you're willing to become the person who lives them. Here's what separates you from the top 1% right now. It's not intelligence. It's not connections. It's not luck. It's whether you listen for ghost notes or just hear words. Whether you chase comfort or collect strategic failures. Whether you ask, what will this get me, or what will this make me? Whether you think in weeks or in cathedral time. Whether you take balanced bets or asymmetric ones. The millionaires and the broke share the same 24 hours, the same access to information, the same fundamental biology. The difference is their mental operating system, and operating systems can be upgraded. If you made it this far, comment ghost notes below to prove you're among those who listen differently. Your mind, your software, your choice. Starting today, you can install these rules. You can begin listening for what's not being said. You can start failing forward. You can think beyond your own lifetime. The top 1% aren't a different species. They're just running different code. Now you have access to that code. The only question remaining is whether you'll execute. If this changed how you see success, hit subscribe. There's more operating system upgrades coming.